today. From the islands in the Seine, in the center of the Seine, looking to see what remains. Thankful that there is still the structure, that the towers still stand, that the structure basically is intact, although damaged and blackened by the fire. I can tell you we're just getting word, Le Monde is reporting that there will be a major concert on Saturday, a fundraising concert. It's going to be called Notre-Dame de Paris, Le Grand Concert, and it's going to be a special show to raise money to rebuild. The president, Emmanuel Macron, has been very clear that because the cathedral is the epicenter of our lives, as he described it, the rebuilding will be immediate, and already hundreds of millions of euros have been committed. There is the shot as we look at the back of the cathedral. I want to tell you what we're going to begin now with Renée Filippone, who's traveled from London to cover what is happening in Paris. We're going to do something with our friends at social media, our team at social media, where you send questions to me. I'm going to talk to Renée, and you're going to meet the two guests that she has for you there in Paris. And we're going to have a conversation, anything you want to know about what has happened in Paris and where things stand, or any stories that you want to share. You can watch this on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Periscope, and you can go there to tweet your question or to send in your questions on any of those platforms, also on Twitter, and they're going to get to me, and I'm going to get to Renée. And Renée, let me say good morning to you. There's a little bit of delay in my conversation with Renée, but nothing that's going to prevent us from carrying on with this. So Renée, good morning to you. You're going to introduce your guests in just a second, but my first question to you, since we haven't talked for about an hour and 20 minutes, is any new information? What is the latest that you're hearing there in terms of aftermath and inspection, I guess, going on at the site right now?
Well, Heather, we know right now there are still a lot of streets that are closed off around the cathedral, and that's because of the ongoing investigation there, and also concerns about stability and people living in buildings around the cathedral. You've mentioned quite a bit about some of the damages, some of the holes in the cathedral that people are talking about, but while all of that is going on, there's still the fight to preserve the artwork and the relics, and the investigation into trying to determine exactly what happened and how this fire was started yesterday evening. We know that there are about 50 people involved at this point in that investigation, and that people are looking at and asking questions of the renovations that were going on in the cathedral, specifically of the spire. Now, we've heard this hour, one of the contractors who was involved in that issued a very emotional statement, basically saying, you know, he's not sure what happened, that all his workers were gone when the fire started, and it just raises more questions about sort of what lit that initial blaze, and those are questions that people are going to want answers to. You know, it's a very emotional day for people who've been stopping by here, pausing to take in the scene, take in what the cathedral looks like. Very different today than it did yesterday, and that's something that is a bit hard for people to really take in and understand. So I do have a couple guests here with me today, and you, I know, will have some great questions from Facebook and Twitter for them as well. But I'll get the conversation started. We have Mechtild Rössler. She's director of UNESCO World Heritage Center. Right here. And Isabelle Hudon, she's the Canada's ambassador to France. So we'll start with you. We're standing in front of the cathedral right now. You watched the video yesterday. What were your major concerns as you were watching a very significant blaze tore through it?
I actually came last night, and I came this morning to look at the situation, because this is a part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of the banks of the Seine, which was inscribed in 1991, and it's one of the major, the emblematic building of this whole World Heritage Site. So for us, the question was, what is the stability of the building, what has gone? So at least 2/3 of the roof has gone, and so major damages must be inside. So we have put together a team at UNESCO, including from our advisory bodies, from ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and Sites, and ICROM, to be at the disposal of the French authorities, because we have a lot of experience collected with fires at World Heritage Sites worldwide.
Ambassador Hudon, Canadians clearly care about this. You know, we have a lot of coverage on TV and radio. People are watching this. Why do you think this is something that's resonating in what we're seeing here with the Canadian audience?
Well, a Canadian audience care about Notre-Dame de Paris as anyone around the world. We can see right here today, there's thousands and thousands of people, of course, Parisian, French, but also people coming around the world. First, probably they came to visit Notre-Dame de Paris, but now they hear, they see, and to testify that this cathedral is still up. There's the roof missing. You have to look the before and after. I had to go back to the before to realize now there's a flat roof or inexistent roof. There's a special link with Canadian, and especially the Francophone, because you would remember that Luc Plamondon produced a show, Notre-Dame de Paris. It went on for more than 20 years and it toured around the globe. So as any tourist coming here, Canadian, they stop first and foremost at Notre-Dame de Paris. Last year it was 14 million visitors that came, not necessarily for the first time, but every time we have a visitors pairs, well, they come to Notre-Dame de Paris. It's a must.
Heather, I'll take it back to you now. I'm sure you have some questions of your own for these guests, and you probably at this point also have some questions online.
We do, and we're going to be keeping Mechtild in particular very busy as she looks and talks to us about the artifacts and the treasure. But just a question to you, Renee. First of all, Sarah Luo on Facebook sending us a question about the cause. You had mentioned the renovation, and that seems to be a focal point for the investigation. We heard from the public prosecutor already this morning. What is the latest information that we're getting on cause?
Yeah, you know, the word from the investigators is it is an accident, but they're still trying to determine specifics about how that happened. Now, the interesting point, as I mentioned before, is that the individuals involved in the scaffolding, or they're saying, you know, they did not have anyone working there that could have started the fire. So there's going to be a lot of steps involved in this investigation. And, you know, there are 50 people involved in it. They're taking this very seriously. There are a lot of beautiful landmarks around the city. If there's any lessons that can be learned or anything that they can understand about how this happened, that's definitely something that the authorities here want to get to the bottom of.
And that is, Sarah, thank you for the question as we start off about the cause, so many people wanting to know. We watched it spread so quickly, Renee, yesterday, and engulf, I mean, just the roof and, of course, that moment when the spire toppled. But there's been a lot of discussion about the forest, as it's known, the medieval wood that was in the roof. And Felicity on YouTube wants to know what happened in the roof. What's it made of that it just, that immediate conflagration? Can you ask Mechtild a little bit about how it was built and the wood that caught fire so fiercely?
We've heard a lot about that wood. They're talking about 52 acres of wood. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. There's a lot of wood both in the roof and in the spiral. This is why actually the spiral went. But I want to also inform you that in many cases when renovations works are underway, we have seen fires because the conditions are totally different. You have a lot of chemicals and other products involved. So this can happen during renovations, but we need, of course, find the cause. What is very important now to look at the remains of the wood, so it means also maybe we can recover parts of it and we can restore parts of it, and part need to be reconstructed.
And I heard from people as well, just that replacing that kind of wood in that amount will be very difficult.
It will be difficult, but it's not impossible. We have done more impossible things at UNESCO, so that's possible.
You hear that attitude quite a lot around here, Heather. You know, people are hopeful about the future of this building today. Very different than sort of the words and the emotion we were feeling yesterday. You can really feel that shift already.
Well, as the president said, you know, it is absolutely intrinsically linked to the French identity. And one of my guests, Renee, here said, of course they will rebuild. How could they not? But it was interesting that Mechtild spoke to exactly one of the questions that we've had from Clarice Perret on Facebook. How much can be saved? I'll get to some of the other specific things that we know have been saved, but she's concerned about how much can be saved. We know there's some smoke damage, for example, to some of the larger artworks in the cathedral. Does Mechtild have any sense on, at this early point, on just how much will be left?
I think the artworks can be recovered if they are still there, and damages can be addressed. But what is also very important to look at the movable heritage, which belonged here to the church, and the French authorities have now a cooperation with the Louvre to recover the movable heritage and to put it to safety for the time when we start with the restoration works. But I think what is very much needed is the first assessment. Mind you, when we had the fire at Rio with the museum, we had to wait for 2 weeks to enter the building. So it's not a given that we can do it immediately, but as soon as possible, we will be very happy to help the French authorities.
I would add to Mechtild that there's the assessment, and it's needed to do the right assessment. But right away last night, when President Macron was here, we felt the will. The will was there, and he declared, we will rebuild this cathedral from wherever we start. This will continue, and we will rebuild. And an hour into the fire, then only two French families pledged more than 300 million euros, and it's not done. And we've just heard about the concert. So there's the assessment, there's the will, and the savoir-faire in France. We're talking about the Louvre, and there's a real expertise between UNESCO and especially all the museums in France to do the impossible with those artifacts and art pieces.
Are either of you surprised by how quick that response was and how fast the money started flowing?
Well, not surprised about the money. I was very proud to see the president right away declaring that it was to be rebuilt. And remember, last night, a few minutes before 8 o'clock, we were not waiting to see that on TV. We were waiting to hear President Macron answering the Gilets jaunes crisis. And what was magic at this moment is that we all left this kind of waiting for government measures to see solidarity. In a second, everyone came together and say, we will make this impossible possible.
Any other questions you have there specifically for either of these?
For Ambassador Hudon, if you don't mind, Renée. So they're able to hear me, correct? Ambassador Hudon, thank you for being here. On that point, one of our questions on Facebook is from Madeleine Tanner, wondering about what the government is doing, the government of Emmanuel Macron. And we've certainly heard him immediately pledge to rebuild, immediately suggest that there will be a convening of people coming together. This came from the mayor, Hidalgo, as well, bringing countries, bringing donors together to bring in money. I'm wondering if there's any sense of what you think of that kind of mobilization of international support, and also whether there might be any indication Canada might be involved.
Well, first of all, on Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau was very quick at sharing his thoughts and saying that Canada will be there. It's not yet sure how. We have expertise. I know also that Mayor Hidalgo offered anyone who wants to contribute and donate that it's going to be a public campaign for everyone to contribute. I was impressed on how quick President Macron, the Prime Minister, and all cabinet dropped everything to focus on Notre-Dame de Paris, and that said a lot last night. And this morning, a committee was created, and again, President Macron and his Prime Minister are at the table trying to identify the right priorities and solutions to rebuild. Not to say that money will be easy to find. but it came so quickly, the first reaction, that I'm really confident about around the will that we can feel here. And you know what? I've been in Paris for the last 18 months, and one word to describe France: resilience.
You've been in Paris for a lot longer than 18 months. You know, as someone who could technically call himself a Parisian, what's this been like for you?
For me, it was quite amazing last night to see the support from all the people. Everybody was sticking together. The people on the street, they really thought that's our heritage, that's our identity, we need to protect it. And I think that was the big message I took home. And that touches me deeply because we work in very many difficult situations around the world with natural disasters, with fires at cultural World Heritage sites, but also sites which are destroyed in conflict situations. So we faced that many times, but here it was really wonderful to see the reaction immediately from the people on the street.
Okay.
Anything else specific you have?
I do,
Heather?
Renee. And let me jump in and let me just explain to our viewers, such a number of people using broadcasting on this story. Our signal visually has frozen, but we can still hear you, Renee, and we're looking at the live picture of the cathedral. So we'll carry on our conversation. This is directly from Mechtild about a couple of particular things. Mechtild on YouTube and Cynthia Rose, very appropriately named, on Facebook, wondering about the stained glass, the rose windows. So that's one part to the question, Mechtild, if we could, but I also, another specific important artifact, the bells. Have they been damaged or destroyed? That's from Valerie on Facebook as well. So if Mechtild could ask what we could answer, please, what we know specifically of the bells and of the windows.
Now, if you look carefully behind me, you see some of the windows still standing, not everything. If you look up, there is a part missing. So that needs to be checked because the windows, the glass could be also damaged through the fire blast. They could be destabilized. And we have experts specifically on this. On the bells, I haven't checked, actually. So this I need to check.
Well, if I can,
Yes,
if
please.
I can quote last night on TV and again this morning, that was the fear of firefighters to see those bells to drop because obviously they're so heavy, but they confirmed that everything, they stayed untouched and stable for now.
That is the information we have too. That most famous bell, Emmanuel, in the South Tower, according to the latest word we have, is that is intact and in that South Tower. As we look at officials arriving there at the ground, what you're seeing in these spots, and I'll be back with more questions, but just for everyone watching, not just on CBC News Network, but on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Periscope, as we team with our social media colleagues, you're seeing some of the ministers as they arrive to thank the emergency responders, the 500 firefighters. There you see the culture minister, you see the junior interior minister in some of these shots and other cabinet ministers. But 500 firefighters responded and fought valiantly for 8-9 hours to finally, in the early morning hours, bring the fire under control. And what we learned from the man in just to the left is Nunez, the junior interior minister, saying that it was a matter of 15 to 30 minutes before that was all that they had to work with before the structure was going to be compromised. So it was really to the wire, and they responded as we watched with essentially what the mayor called a human chain, trying to get the water on those flames to bring it under control. We're going to keep a watch on this. Now, I can just tell you, I can give you some of the answers to this. I mentioned that we were having some technical difficulties. The broadband width is such an issue. We do have them back. Renee, we have you back. We're just going in and out a little bit, so we may lose you, but we're going to keep on going with our questions. Let me come back to you with a question. Just let me go back to what we had earlier. A very interesting question from, hang on with me here, from Facebook. And this is the question about casualties. I can answer that one. That's Gico wondering about the casualties. There are no casualties, which is wonderful. And that is a
None.
One firefighter severely injured, but nobody has passed away, thankfully. That is rather miraculous. Jerry O'Brien, though, on Facebook, wondering about this, Renee. Many people have been blaming terrorism. We talked about the cause, authorities have said accidental. Is there any threat? Can you talk at all with you or your guests in terms of the extraordinary number of hoaxes that were immediately perpetuated on social media? Very worrisome and concerning to look at. But what people are saying about that as a threat, it's non-existent according to authorities, and the kinds of hoaxes and scams that immediately popped up.
Yeah, it's interesting, Heather, when you speak about that specifically. I was covering the story yesterday evening as it was developing, and when you were listening to the authorities and the people actually involved, the police, the officials, the politicians, they were quite clear from the beginning that that was not really an issue that was on their radar. So, I guess it's one of those examples about making sure that you know where your sourcing is coming from when you're hearing these sorts of things, because I followed all the wires and I watched all the press conferences, and that really was never a concern that came up. I don't know if either of you have something to add to that.
I totally agree with you, Renee. The coverage from the beginning, I went to bed late last night. Never we heard this. Of course, it can be top of mind, but coverage never mentioned this, and it really was focused on real news.
Absolutely, I can confirm this.
Yeah.
Okay, Renee,
Hope
back
that
to
answers
you.
this question, Heather.
You did, and thank you very much, and thank you for it. Addresses the misinformation that was circulating and that was quickly shut down, as it should have been. A couple of questions, again, going back to you, Mechtild, notably from Pamela Giroux on Facebook, and it's tied into something that we're getting on Twitter from Ken Morrows. But do they foresee the rebuild, whatever form it takes, of the cathedral to be an exact replica, or will this rebuild take on modern designs? And then further to that question, from Ken, as I mentioned, do we have the artisans, do we have the craftspeople out there who can actually replicate these extremely intricate, historic buildings, features, all of the things that we love so much? So will it be exact, and do we have the people to do that?
Well, I'll let Mechtild talk to that. I do know that the Vatican themselves have offered up all of their expertise, if required, in any sort of restoration. But would it look the same, do you think, or what's your...
It is actually a very difficult question, because you should do a rebuilding and a reconstruction as it looked before, but at the same time we need to know which is the part which is new and which is the part which is old. Definitely no new design, that's for sure. UNESCO will also check this, of course, but I think in the case of Notre-Dame we are in a very lucky situation, because we have a lot of documentation. Right. We have archival material, films, video, all the tourists give their photos in addition to the scientific data we have, both with the Church of Paris and also with the National Archives. I think this is really a given that it is possible. In terms of the craftsmanship, this is a very, very important part. Since the medieval ages, we had those Bauhütten, which means all the craftsmen working for the cathedrals, and they still exist. Actually, there is a nomination currently going on for the intangible heritage at UNESCO on the craftsmanship, which is done by several countries together with France and Germany. So that is demonstrating that we still have the craftsmen, but it's also a threatened heritage. So we need to train more young people to go into that.
Renee, let me jump in.
How do you feel if it didn't look the same or look very different or modern? Do you have a thought on that?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry, Ambassador. You go right ahead. You finish your thought. I'd love to know, because of course, not too far from where you are, you have the famous crystal in front of the Louvre, which continues to be a point of discussion for some. So how do you feel about modern meeting Gothic and heritage?
Well, I think that we can bring modernity into how we do it, but the look and the feel will have to be highly respectful of how it looked for the past 850 years, I would say. and I'm not yet at UNESCO.
Okay, more questions. So that was a fabulous one from Ken. Thank you very much. Getting lots of questions about the cost of such a rebuild. Colin on Facebook, Colin Parent, wondering how much it's estimated. I haven't seen any dollar figures, Renee. I'm not sure if you had, but I haven't seen any. It will, obviously, we've seen hundreds of millions of euros pledged so far. And also a YouTube question wondering why doesn't the Vatican pay for it, even though it's offered, as you suggest, Renee, consultation on the best way forward to rebuild. This is a question from Matthew Callow that I'd like to put in to Mechtild on Facebook. How is the organ, the great organ, the original, one of the most famous musical instruments in the world? Has there been any information on it?
I haven't seen any information on the organ, but maybe some of you know.
I did see some copy this morning saying that it was in good condition.
Totally saved.
Totally saved.
Totally saved. So it was, I guess, protected by someone up there, but apparently totally saved.
Is this a fairly iconic organ as well? Can you tell us anything about it?
Absolutely, and it has a wonderful sound, and if it's totally saved, I'm very, very happy to hear that.
A lot of happy moments today, Heather.
Well, it's true, and I think just absolutely reinforcing what you said, the Archbishop of Paris, I mean, this is not his home church, but it's sort of considered his home church, home cathedral, and the information from the Archbishop was that the organ is safe. Pipes going right back to the Middle Ages, so important that it too be protected. So, Renee, we're looking at this as we're speaking to you, our live shot again from the rear of the cathedral. We can see the scaffolding, we can see where the spire stood. Maybe we're getting to the end of our time on social media and getting to the end of our questions, which have been fantastic on Facebook and on YouTube and on Periscope. So why don't I send it back to you for closing thoughts from your two guests?
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, you know what? I've only been here since this morning, and I will have to say the one thing I noticed is how different it is standing here in front of the cathedral compared to what I saw in those images last night. I think those images really took a lot of people's breath away. And yes, there will be a lot of work to do, a lot of rebuilding to do, and there probably are things, that were lost, but I think people were thinking the worst last night, and I think we're standing here today, and my impression that I'm getting from both of you and other individuals that it could have been a lot worse. So just your final thoughts on how you're feeling today compared to sort of what you were feeling last night when you were watching those images on television.
I was much relieved this morning to see the cathedral still standing, because that was not quite sure, because it took a long time. I want to thank all the firefighters, and I would like to thank the people for being so passionate about World Heritage.
That's true. Last night it was disbelief. It was people were in shock. Solidarity came very quickly, and what I can feel this morning and today is hope. Hope around rebuilding, but hope that all together we can make this impossible possible. And again, Canada will be supportive to Paris and to France into the rebuilding. Prime Minister gave his support, and I visited some ministers this morning just to reiterate the fact that if the expertise of Canada is needed, we will be there.
Well, thank you both for joining us this hour today and sharing your thoughts, your insight, your information. We really appreciate that. And back to you, Heather.
Renee, let me thank you, and as well Mechtild and Isabelle Hudon, Canada's ambassador to France. Just very valuable information, and Renee, thank you for guiding it from there. We'll look forward to your ongoing reporting from the scene. And we have a live shot here. Again, we want to show you just before we were concluding our questions. Lena on Facebook got through with a question about, is there security on duty, wanting to prevent theft of any kind? We can tell you there is a very strong police cordon in place, and that will likely continue for the days ahead. And also on site, as we look at the live shot, we're seeing a number of experts as they begin their inspection process. The structure stands, as Mechtild said, a sign that brought much relief to the people of Paris, that the cathedral was still standing and those bell towers. But there are 3 holes in the roof. There are areas of vulnerability, and over the next 48 hours, they're going to be assessing things. Our coverage is going to continue on CBC News Network, but thank you to our friends at social media and to you watching on Facebook, on YouTube, and Periscope. Thank you for your excellent questions. Stay with us for ongoing coverage of the aftermath of the Notre-Dame fire. You're watching CBC News Network.